I'm doing well, Ray. I hope you are too. We have a guest with us tonight. We'll get into the introduction of her in a bit, but I've her name is Jennifer Bray Thompson, and we known each other for a number of years, with a big gap in the middle. But Jennifer's had a very interesting career, and we're going to learn a lot about it in the next hour or so. And I think you'll appreciate what she's doing in true crime and as a polygrapher and helping people straighten out sometimes. Well, she's helped solve crimes too, but also with some, shall we say, relationship issues. And we can discuss that down the line. So, Jennifer, it is very,
Jim, let me
you are
just let me
very
let me
welcome.
just say one thing, Jim.
Thank you.
Here, I
You
just want
may.
to say one thing in about you, Jen. That this is someone who's had the opportunity to work all over the place,
Mm.
including homicides in the FBI's behavioral science unit, the medical examiner's office, and even conducted thousands of polygraphs.
Hmm.
So, Jim, if you lie tonight, she'll know. Just want you to know that. So
Ray,
don't lie.
Ray, you're a really handsome guy. Jen,
Well,
Oh
we know
no.
that's the truth,
Jen
right? We
put
know
you on the
that's the
spot
truth.
here.
We know that's the truth. So there you go.
No,
Yes, yes.
it's not fair. I just like when people come up to me. Oh, can you hey Fitz, can you profile my girlfriend?
Yeah,
I just met her last week. Yeah, okay,
I get it too.
sure.
Yeah.
We'll have her come with me for a while and we'll talk and then
Oh,
see where that
jeez.
goes. So Jen hears all the time. Oh, is he telling the truth? We're gonna get into that tonight. We did it last week with Joe Navarro. He's not
Yes.
a polygrapher. He did it more from body English, facial tics, things like that. Anyway, Jen, let's start right now. When is the first time we met? Give our audience a little bit of a background on that, and then we'll get into the second time we met.
Sure. This was back in August of 1998.
Wow.
I was at the University of Baltimore studying psychology for my undergrad, and I came to understand that there was an internship with the FBI. And so, of course, I applied immediately, and I was grateful enough to be chosen. And so I went down to Quantico. Actually, it was Aquia, you'll probably remember, is where the NCAVC was at the time. Um,
National Center for the Analysis of Violent
of
Crime.
violent crime, yes. Went down there and interned until, well, through most of December. But I was introduced to you as one of the special agents there, and you had come off of the Unabomber case. And so that was very interesting to all of us that were there. There were five of us, I believe, that were chosen for that particular program. So very exciting. It was great to meet you and a lot of the other special agents that were there at the time, supervisory special agents, I should say, having worked a long time in the field and getting a great case that then brought them to the behavioral science unit. So yeah, that's how we met.
And that was a nice, yeah, we always had interns in there for most of the year, maybe the spring semester, summer, and then the fall, and almost always very high quality people. And I do remember you, and you met me there, and you were very impressed. But didn't someone even more impress you that you met there, and maybe you still hang out with?
Yes, I wound up marrying one of the other interns, my husband, Sean. He came from Minnesota. He was also selected, and we met there, and he just never went home to Minnesota. So it was a good thing.
A marriage made in Quantico or Aquia,
Yes,
as we'll call it.
Aquia. Yes.
So we'll get into the middle years, but then the lost years we'll call them. But
Yes.
then when did we meet again?
We met last June, it may have been. I went to a VDOC Society meeting. I had occasion to meet Special Agent Scott Duffy at an event in the Hamptons, and he was talking with me about VDOC. Based on my background, he thought maybe I'd be a good candidate. And so I went ahead and applied, and anyway, found myself at my first meeting. And I introduced myself to you, just sort of saying, "Hey, do you remember me? It's Jen Thompson. You know, I knew you back in 1998." And you sort of looked at me and you said, "I'm not sure, but I believe you." so, so that was our second introduction, and we've been talking and chatting ever since.
and I met Sean again at the formal function we had at VDoc. I think that was in October of last year, and
Yes, that was nice.
he's a great guy. We sat together, I think, at the table, and
Hmm.
for like an award ceremony, they do at VDoc every year. So folks, that's the two separate times we met, and I think we'll be seeing a lot more of each other, certainly with these VDoc meetings. Ray, I wouldn't be surprised. You used to come down out of the Philly division 2 to 3 times a year to
Oh
Quantico
yeah,
to
all
the
the time.
unit. You may have been there
Oh,
late summer through December of you spent about didn't you spend like 6 weeks with us? And what time frame was that?
it was August through December. Yep.
And Ray, what 6 weeks? You spent an extended period there.
Yeah, Jim. It kind of all runs together,
Sure.
so I can't really recall, but I think it was in the winter. So it
Okay.
was probably like January. I think it was January to March. So
Okay.
it was January, February, March, something like that.
But I'm trying to think. In the fall of '98, we were definitely discussing the Center City Rapist case. You may
Yes.
have been there a few times, Ray, on that with
Yes.
Chuck Boyle and others. So yeah, the odds are you two have probably crossed paths at some point in the past in that regard. So Ray, you want to chip in here? I want to get a little bit more where Jen went after her internship.
Well, was there a case, Jen, that you worked early on that made you realize that this is what you want to do?
Actually, not a case, but a movie. And it may sound very cheesy to many of your listeners, but I know we've all had those moments in our lives where we just sort of said, "Oh my gosh, this is really making an imprint on me." So I saw Silence of the Lambs when it was in the movie theater, and I was so enamored with it and so taken by the psychology of it that I decided that I needed to be involved in that way, in some capacity. So that movie really changed me, my trajectory, my career path, and I stand by that. It affected me really deeply, and I enjoyed it, and it's the reason that I do what I do now.
Did you ever have the opportunity? I know you've done thousands of polygraphs, but have you ever had the opportunity to either polygraph or interview a serial offender?
I have not. No, that would be a really good addition in my career. I would really enjoy that. I do have training with post conviction sex offender testing. And so that would be certainly a repeat offender. I have not received a contract on that yet, but I do have training in that regard. So it is my hope that someday I can be sitting across from someone getting those details. And as egregious as it is and as upsetting as it can be, as an interviewer and interrogator, it's often one of those things that you really, really hope that you get in your life, in your career, to be able to sort of cut your teeth and to really dig into what's happening in their mind and why they do the things they do. And it's all about getting the confession in my mind.
A lot of people um, think about serial killers and think they know what they're thinking. But I want to ask you, based upon, and I know you've done thousands of interviews, as Jim and I have too.
Hmm.
Do you believe serial offenders are more predictable than people think they are, or less predictable?
I think to a certain degree they are predictable, I will say. I don't know whether it's more or less than what we think, but I think that there are patterns, as I'm sure that both of you know, patterns and ways of doing things that is just part of their existence, part of their life, and certainly part of fantasy. When you get into serial offenders, there are
Mhm.
things that they have to do to make things enjoyable for them. I hate to choose that word, but that's really where they're living in their mind. And so there are things that they do, their signature, if you will, their MO. They need to do those things in order to make that crime beneficial to them. And so, in that way, you can very much predict, so to speak, what their behaviors may be and what you can do to look at offenders' behavior and see, is this something that he's going to repeat? Is he escalating? Is he simply just testing things out? We don't know. But if we look at patterns of crimes, you can see uh, you can see the patterns that develop. You can see the things that they do that can be somewhat predictable.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's need driven. It all comes down to need-driven
Need-driven
behavior. My favorite two words or 2.5 words there, whatever it is, and that really dictates a lot. And it's based in hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years of our genetic makeups and what make some men do some things, some women do others. And the serial offenders are the ones who haven't socialized accordingly. They can't control that need-driven behavior, and they do what they do. And over the studies that have been done over the years, of course, there's been a lot measured in that regard. It makes them, I won't say predictable, but it makes patterns that are in fact observable. And in fact, and officers and investigators can narrow down what a suspect may be doing or attempting to do, or even the geographic area they may be trying to do it in next time. Yeah, so that's a good response there. So
Jim, before you go on, I just want to ask one quick question. Jen, before you came on tonight, you caught Jim and I doing a special.
Yes.
And the special was on the attempted assassination of the president with the individual. We never mentioned the offender's name, but I'd like to know what your insights are regarding that offender and what occurred.
I would say that looking at the offender based on what I've seen in the media is that he had a fish to fry, so to speak. He was upset with the administration, as far as I'm aware. He was a computer guy, came from California on a train, had weapons with him. It was well thought out, and it's concerning in one regard that he was able to get so close to the president. I feel like there should have been a barrier a little further out, and that the hotel was operating in a normal capacity is also a little bit of a concern to me. But I do think that I'm glad that he was caught. I'm glad that he was not killed, because I would love to interview him, have someone interview him and get behind what happened and try to figure out more of his, the things that drove him. It's interesting to hear that from people. But that would be my take on it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I said in a media hit I did this morning with Wind Radio in Chicago that just like they're doing behavioral interviewing of the Long Island serial killer, and Jennifer Ray kind of alluded to it. We don't mention their names on this show. We don't want to give them the honor, or if you will, of us ever mentioning them by name. Anyway, part of the plea agreement with that killer in Long Island was that he be interviewed by FBI profilers, extensive behavioral interviews. That's just not just an hour in and out. The setup is, of course, for multiple days in a row. Let's find how that guy thinks. I would love the same thing to happen with this shooter, not to hold his hand or kiss his butt, anything like that, but say, what made you get to this point? 30 hours or so on a train, whatever it was, longer, shorter, carrying these weapons with you, checking it, knowing your life is going to be changed forever if you even survive it. So yeah, I agree with you, and I know Ray too. And Ray, we talked about the Center City rapist case. We were supposed to have a behavioral interview set up with him, getting inside of a serial rapist's mind, but at the last minute he backed out of his plea agreement. But he's basically doing life in prison anyway. There's nothing we could do to force him to do that out in Colorado. So we never did have the benefit of that interview. But yeah, some of the best training I had was going into prisons in my early profiling days. Part of that training was, and I interviewed plenty of bad guys across the table when they were first arrested. I know Ray did too. But to have these guys in prison for a few years, having committed multiple crimes, you're not there to kiss their butts, offer them any deals. Just say, hey, why did you rape the first woman, the second woman, the fifth woman, the 10th woman, and walk us through each one. And it was just amazing information we gleaned from each one, which helped us solve other cases down the line. So that's important training. And I hope someone would go in, all these mass shooters of recent times, I would love to see these kind of interviews undertaken with them, because I think there's so much to learn. I hope my former unit is not giving up on that. So, Jennifer, you spent some time with the NSA, correct?
Yes.
I know you can't give too much away there, but Can you give a broad stroke view of what your life was like there at that agency, what they do even?
Sure. It's the National Security Agency, and it's in Maryland for those of your listeners outside of the U.S. And it's near Fort Meade, not far from D.C. It's on Fort Meade, as a matter of fact. And so what I did was I was a special agent and polygraph examiner for the NSA from 2013 until 2019. And in that time is when I had my experience running the polygraphs. I did 1,000 of them within 4 years, which is a lot. I've talked to some people that have said they've done that over a 15-year career. So it was quite a lot. They had us working very hard, but our mission was very important. We were polygraphing people who were trying to become employed by NSA, or they were already in access and they needed to maintain their clearance. So those were the two types of tests that I ran. Then after my 4-year stint with Polygraph, I went to counterintelligence. And my job there was to interview particularly linguists, people that wanted to come and work with the NSA. We needed to do what was called a womb to tomb interview, which is from the very first time they were around, from their birth all the way to current day, and everything in between of every aspect of their life, and then investigate all of that information that they would provide. And that was to ensure that they were safe to hire, essentially. So I did that and enjoyed it a lot.
And just to be clear, the government calls linguists basically translators.
Correct.
And they're important positions, don't get me wrong, but where I come from as a linguist, they don't study the scientific elements of language as I did and other linguists do. But we know what you're saying. So you're looking at translators, interpreters, and yeah, if they're very good at their language, that's great. That's what we want. But you got to make sure they're also not tied into those folks who they grew up with speaking the same language. So that had to be an interesting. I'm sure you passed many, but I'm sure you failed a few too.
Yes, it was concerning sometimes the relationships that these people had, and their relationships as it might appear related to terrorism, and so we needed to be very careful to not be, of course, admitting someone into the NSA who had any ties of that kind. So it was nerve-wracking work. We had a lot on the line, and we had to be right every time. But it was interesting. I enjoyed it a lot.
And we can get a little more into polygraphing, but as we go along here, but what a lot of people don't realize, you don't just sit down with a person, hook them up and start asking questions. The pre-interview is very important. And obviously your research well before the womb to tomb part you were discussing, but certainly the pre-interview is important and the post-interview is important.
Yes.
And in many cases, that's where the information comes out, one or perhaps both, or maybe in the middle, in which deception is indicated. And that's where the people come out and hopefully eventually tell them the truth. Maybe they can survive the question. They didn't understand it or whatever. But yeah, you can know we'll just say X's and O's of how to run the machine. That's one thing. But you really need high-level interview skills. And I know you have those, Jen. That's why you're successful. And I know, Ray, you've been enough. Neither of us are polygraphers, but we've sat through watching polygraphs being administered through the window, the one-way, mirrored window, whatever, and you can listen to it. And it's really an art. It is science, but it's also an art in how a good polygrapher gets his or her job done. And I know it's still not admissible in the courts. Neither is profiling. I feel I'm a really good profiler, and sometimes I feel, that maybe sometimes profiling should be in the courts. But I also know people that aren't that great profilers. There are great polygraphers, and there are some not so great. And maybe for that reason alone, at least for now, neither of those sciences / arts are permitted in the courts in terms of testimony. So that's been the law for years. Ray, anything in here about polygraphing?
Yeah, when you do, yeah, absolutely. When you conduct that pre-interview, Jen, and you're interviewing somebody, what are you actually looking for beyond the words?
I'm looking for their baseline, basically. When we're talking about their favorite sport or where they were from or what they like to do as a hobby, we're looking for that baseline of behavior. We're looking for also those cluster behaviors where you can tell that they're calm, they're relaxed, they're not exhibiting any signs of stress. Now, granted, everyone comes in with anxiety, but there are different levels of that. And so in the beginning, people tend to be they tend to be anxious, but they tend to be willing to talk about things as long as you're likable. I always have said that to people. When you're interviewing someone, if you're not likable, they're not going to talk to you. So you need to really befriend them. You need to take time in that interview to talk about things that aren't really of any consequence to the test. But you need to make sure that they like you and they need to open up to you. It's a critical part of the polygraph for sure.
Well, let me ask you, do you consider yourself, and I know the answer to this already, do you consider yourself to be a well-trained interviewer?
I do. Yes.
Yeah, as Jim does, and I do too. Now,
Hmm.
can somebody truly beat somebody like you, Jim, or I in an interview?
I would say in an interview, I would say it's tough to do that because there are so many things that we are trained in, and we just collectively as interviewers and interrogators that would make it very difficult for someone to get through the net, in my opinion. There's always people watching the interviews, as you've mentioned, and
Mhm.
so there's also their input. So it's really it's a village. It's not just one person. And so I really think that makes a huge difference when you're interviewing people. We had people watching our tests for quality control as well. And so it just helps to have that village of people behind you to get it done. And I think it'd be very difficult to get through one of us. I do.
I agree with you. So let me ask you this. The court doesn't believe that polygraphy and polygraphs are reliable or credible, but how accurate are they really when
Hmm.
they're done right by
Yes.
someone trained? How how accurate are they really? Honestly.
They are, I would say, between 90 and 95% reliable,
Mm.
accurate. About 1 in 100 people shouldn't be hooked up to a polygraph because they simply do not respond to the questions. It's very odd, but it's something that research has shown that there are people that simply don't have a lot of reaction to those questions that you're asking. It's not something that happens all the time, but it's certainly something that's been seen. But yeah, that's what I would say to that.
Now you did 1,000 of these polygraphs.
Yes.
Has anybody ever confessed to you before the test even started?
Yes, I had a woman who brought in a binder with her. This is when I was with NSA, and she was already in Access, so she was employed there for some amount of time, and she brought in a binder with her, and she sat down and she just sort of began the interview by saying, I brought this book of paperwork and I think it's important that you see it. And I said, of course, I've had people bring in Bibles. Well, this time it was a binder of classified information.
Mm.
And I looked at it, and as I was thumbing through it, what she had done was she cut out the word classified out of every one of those documents, and in her mind, it made it okay for her to leave the building with the documents. And she
Mm.
brought them all back to show me what she had done. So I had never had anything like that before. That was interesting.
Well, I was going to ask you this question. What that was? It sounds a little bizarre, but without violating anybody's confidentiality here, what is the most bizarre or unexpected situation you used in a polygraph
That I used.
that you used? Yeah.
Um, let's see. I would say what I did was I would use stories from other cases in order to get someone to feel compelled to talk to me. I often found that that worked. And so one of the stories that I told was one that actually another examiner had occur. there was a man who said that now I'll try not to be crass, but I trust your audience can handle a good amount of things. But in any event, let me just say this: people have experience with animals. And there was a man talking about how there had been a deer on the side of the road and how he went and had sex with that deer. And I was just, thank goodness I have a poker face. But anyway, I was using that example to say to someone, look, are you the type of guy that's going to do this? Are you the type of guy that's going to go out and do what this other person told me they did? Or are you the type of guy that's going to be this way or that way? I used it as an ultimatum because, the guy doesn't want me to be calling him someone who would go and have sex with a deer. He wants to be the alternative theory, right? So it very quickly helped him come to the understanding that what he did, ultimately he could confess to, because it's not as bad as what that other guy had done. So I would use stories like that, to integrate them into my interviews to get people to say, it's that alternative theory. It's you're either this or you're that. And so if you don't give me information, I'm going to assume the worst of you. And so I would use stories and interrelate them in that way. But that's one I remember using frequently.
I have to tell you this one. When I was stationed in Buffalo, we had this bank robber, and he was probably one of the dumbest people I've ever come around. We had a copy machine, and one of the agents put in the copy machine a sheet of paper that had on it liar. And we would ask him a question, and we would say, he would give us the answer, and we knew he was lying without even doing it. He said, all right, this is a lie detector test. Put your hand on top of this machine. It'll say if you're lying. When we press the button, it would come out, the paper would say liar. And eventually he wound up confessing to us. But I mean, those are some of the things. We had a lot of fun. We did some of those things. Here's something, Jen. I'm going to hook you up to a polygraph right now. And I'm going to ask you if you ever judged somebody silently in the first 10 seconds. What would happen?
Oh, I would probably just say yes because I do. Yes, I mean, yes. I think everyone is that way, but I think for people who interview and interrogate, it's probably you're even more likely to do that because it's what you do in your career. It's what you do in your work life. You have to do that as a part of assessing the situation.
I agree.
Two things here. First of all, from that anecdote you related from another polygrapher, we could change the term roadkill to perhaps road thrill. Something I don't want to experience kill or thrill with a dead anything. And Ray, I just hope the statute of limitations have passed. If this guy is still in prison listening to Cold Red right now, hey, that was me that had my hand on it said Xerox. I thought that was a polygraph.
It wasn't my idea, though. It wasn't my idea.
Sure, that's what they
another
all
guy. I just asked. I knew about it, though.
Well, we're gonna hook you up to the Xerox machine and see what the hell spits out of there with the paper.
Absolutely.
Speaking of dead things, not a good segue, but you did work for a medical examiner's office for a while. We may be going in reverse order here. I'm not sure. Tell us a little bit about that job because that can be kind of graphic too. I didn't say pornographic. I said kind of graphic.
Yeah. Right. Yes, it really was. It was an extraordinary job, actually. It was, it's funny. I remember when I was being interviewed and the chief medical examiner said to me, "What is your dream job?" And I looked right at her and I said, "This is it. This is what I want to do. I'm here. This is the one." And so she looked really shocked by that, but I don't think she expected that. But it really was. It was at that time, it was my dream job. And I really enjoyed it. We had to go out to scenes in Baltimore City, which kept us very busy, Baltimore City, Maryland. And we would respond to the scene and we would collect the deceased. And of course, the crime lab would be there doing their thing. And nobody would take any action with the body until we would get there. So they were all routinely waiting for us. But once we got there, they could continue more of their work. But it was an exciting job and I enjoyed it. And I got to actually, when we're in this profession, we say things that might sound weird to those that are not. But I had the privilege of checking in the DC sniper's final victim. He came to the medical examiner in Maryland, and I typed up his death certificate. And
It
I
was
remember
the
that.
bus driver from Montgomery
Yes.
County.
Yeah.
Yep. Conrad was his
That's
name.
right. Yep.
And so that was very significant to me. I remember doing that, and I remember that he had a ring on his finger, and I put that in an envelope to give to his family. So yeah, that was very significant. And a lot of the scenes, they do affect you, but you have to detach, as I'm sure you all are familiar.
Mm-hmm.
You have to detach from that, because you would not be able to do your job if you stayed related to that humanistic part. If you really, if you really looked at that grieving family who was falling apart when you're there collecting their loved one, it would be too difficult to do. So I'm glad in some regard that I'm able to disconnect, because there's got to be someone who does those jobs. We need those people to function. And so it's important that if you're able to disconnect like that maybe you get into a job that way, or if you can, it'd be a good job for you.
And I assume and you may have already said this, but you were involved with multiple autopsies, postmortems, and the first time you do one of those, it's not that easy. It's one thing
No.
seeing on video or a small screen or something, but in person, it really changes your perception of what is life, what are humans, and all those types of factors. But yeah, you're right. Exactly what you said. Someone has to do it. We need the people
Mhm.
out there. That doesn't mean you enjoy doing it or you like doing it, but it's a profession and you're going to do it right. And it sounded like, at least for the years you were there, that was important to you. And I'm sure you helped, directly or indirectly solve a number of cases. And it's not always easy with some of the remains that you find, as I know
Oh no.
you are aware. They do not look anything like they may have looked in life, and we don't have to get graphic here. It's the first couple times you see something as a police officer, even car accidents, and later, check welfare checks in a house. Someone has
Mhm.
it in a hot summer day with no AC, haven't been heard of
Right.
for a few weeks. It doesn't look pretty. It doesn't smell pretty. The
Mm-mm.
smell stays with you. I'll never forget the smell of decomposition, and I would know it in a second if I smelled it again. And I hope I never do, but I would know police. There's something around here somewhere, whether it's an animal or human, would have to be determined. But so obviously you did a few years there. Then that you left there to go to the NSA.
Yes, that was the order of things.
Yeah.
Polygraph training was really interesting. I had to go to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, for about 3.5 months. My kids were 5 and 8 at the time, and I left them with my husband and went and did that training. Very tough training, super tough. The anatomy and physiology nearly killed me, but I made it through. It was like a master's degree level sort of fire hose down your throat for about 3.5 months. It was really serious. It was no joke, and tough training, and at the federal level. So trained at the National Center in Fort Jackson, South Carolina, for federal polygraph examiners. But I did that, and then I later went through special agent training with NSA.
Very interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff. And from dead bodies to live bodies, and trying to figure clues from them when they laying flat on the litter to the clues with them sitting up in a chair opposite you, and trying to figure out if what they're saying is accurate or not. Interesting stuff.
It is. It's been very interesting career.
Jen, you're with the VDOC Society now,
Yes.
and you had the opportunity to work cold cases.
Yes.
Are you doing that on the outside as well with your business?
Yes, for the Cold Case Foundation. I am a consultant for them, and they send cases from soup to nuts. We even get the little yellow sticky notes that a random investigator wrote and scribbled something down. So we get everything, and we take a look at all of it. We get interviews, we get polygraph, we get, you name it. I mean, you know what a case file consists of. So it comes to me, and I take a look at it, and I do a very, very comprehensive report on the entire case, because the idea is that then when the cold case detectives want to take a look at it, they can simply refer to my report rather than trying to dig into the entire case and go through it. They just simply don't have the time. So I go through and I analyze it based on the 10 pillars of profiling. Greg Cooper, who I'm sure you both know, he is the CEO, if you will, of this shop, the Cold Case Foundation. And so he was a former supervisor. I believe, didn't he run the BSU for a while?
When I first got there in mid-95, he was the, I think, acting unit chief, yes.
Okay, right. So he developed this foundation and has consultants from all over the world who help him in all different disciplines. I was listening to something through Duquesne University when I came upon him. He was a speaker, and he said in the very beginning, if you have any knowledge, skills, or abilities that you think might be able to assist us, please reach out to me. Well, he wasn't even finished talking and I was emailing him. So that was how that came about. I had a great Zoom call with them and they said, well, consider yourself an affiliate, a consultant, and they started sending cases. So it's been very rewarding.
In your experience in working cold case work, what makes a case go cold versus just as unsolvable?
I think when cases go cold is when there's no viable leads. There's nothing more to pursue, so to speak. I think that's when a case goes cold. And so I don't think it's based on time. I think it's based on when the leads dry up. And so that could be less than a year. That could be 10 years, that could be 20. But cases go cold when there's nothing more to pursue, in my opinion.
Well, with that said, then do you believe that today cold cases are more solvable because of technology and or because of fresh perspectives, or both?
I think both. And one of the first plugs I'll give is to Othram Labs. They're in Texas, in Houston, and they have developed an amazing technology to be able to take just the most finite amounts of DNA and develop all sorts of answers for families. They've been amazing. They're tremendous. And so with them, and then with fresh perspective, it's so critical to have that fresh perspective. And that's not to speak ill of the former investigators, but you just need fresh eyes on things sometimes. And I think the two of those things together are a great team and make for a fantastic way to solve crimes.
Nice.
Jen, besides everything you've done in the past, and of course, the wife, a mom, and medical examiner's office, NSA, you in the last few years or so started your own company. Is it Mendax Forensics?
That's it.
You're based out of Annapolis, Maryland.
Yes.
What's the website, real quick? We'll get that out and we'll get it again at the end.
Sure. It's mendaxforensics.com.
What does your company and you do at Mendax Forensics?
We offer polygraph testing. And really, if you think about it, any situation, you can find a reason for polygraph. Whenever there is a question of truth or deception, there's a polygraph for it. It's sort of one size fits all. You just change the questions depending on the circumstance. So we do a lot of infidelity work, believe it or not. People want to know if their spouse or partner has cheated. On Thursday, I have a test where a man believes that his father had sex with his wife, which is very interesting. And so I instructed him, please, to have his father come by himself. I don't want the two of them going to blows in my office. So that can really get dicey. But we do infidelity. We can offer things about immigration, tests about immigration. We do, and really any situation you can think of, criminal cases, post-conviction sex offender testing. Really, there's innumerable amounts of ways to use polygraph.
And you have your own office, and the people make an appointment, and they come in. Obviously, you talk to them first, or emails, and determine the situation, whether you can help or not, and then you're there as kind of a neutral arbiter, right? I mean, you're not there on anyone's side, it sounds like.
Correct.
You are, in a sense, an expert witness, if not actually providing testimony. You're an expert forensic analyst in this regard, and the evidence you're trying to determine is simply the truth.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
and someone could come to you, a husband who thinks his wife is cheating, or a wife who thinks the husband is cheating. Can you even go back a few years and just very generic, kind of a instance or two that you may have worked, and just to help our people better understand what services you offer, but also, how people can get themselves in bad situations?
Sure. I guess the thing that's really typical will be that a spouse will say, "Hey, I think my spouse or partner is cheating," but then they come into the office and the details just, I mean, the details are just mind numbing. You can't believe that people are in a situation where they're in a relationship to the point that they're so doubtful that they need to get a polygraph. You often wonder, where do you go from here? Why, why is there any semblance of relationship left at this point? But for example, maybe 2 weeks ago, I had a test where it was sexual contact with a minor, and he came back inconclusive. Which was disappointing because I personally wanted an answer to that, considering it was a child. She was a minor at the time. She's 23 now, but she continues to claim that he sexually molested her as a child. And the mother of the child came in with the accused and had questions and concerns of her own. And so I do, in the beginning of an interview, let both people come into the room and we talk about those concerns, and then we formulate the questions, and then we run the test. But one of her questions was, she wanted to know if he watched pornography with her. She would have been 8 at the time. And so these little details come in, the more you get below the surface, you start to recognize things that they are dancing around that they really need to address. And I'll be very frank with people. I will tell them, you're not going to embarrass me. You're not going to concern me at all. I need to know these details or I can't give you a proper test. And so some of them sort of shrink down and say, okay, this is it. This is what it was. Many of them are embarrassed. But I try to befriend them. I try to be likable. I try to make sure they know that I am not in judgment of them, that I am there, as you say, just to be an arbiter of the truth, right? Just to determine, are you being deceptive or are you being truthful? I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to accuse you, but I need to know these details in order to make an assessment.
Jen, Jim mentioned truth. You've mentioned truth several times. After everything that you've seen, has your definition of truth changed at all?
I would say people certainly have their own truth. I think that's become very clear to me. It's not always the truth, but it's their truth. So I think that would be the only thing that really is different for me since I've been doing this. Recognizing that people in their own mind can rationalize a lot of things that you or I maybe could not. So when you ask someone about being truthful, you have to define what truth is. And you have to say, why do people lie? People lie because of consequences. And you have to really nail down what those definitions are so that they can't, take their mind and move themselves out of that situation. They can't rationalize what they're doing. They need to stand up against, okay, this is what lie means. This is what truth means. Not your truth, but what is the truth?
Is it possible for someone to truly hide who they are in the long term?
No, I would say your body and your words are always going to betray you. Joe Navarro talked about body language, and statement analysis is something that I'm familiar with as well. And whether you try as hard as you can, there are going to be things that you do or that you say or that you write that are always going to betray you, and the truth will come out. I don't believe anybody can hide from it in in the long term, I think it will uncover itself.
Jen, we maybe should have done this earlier, and I'll take the blame for not asking this. But can you give us like a 90-second summary of how does a polygraph? They used to say polygraph machine. It's probably more polygraph computer now.
Mm-hmm.
But I know it's at 3 different measurement systems, and maybe even more
Mm-hmm.
now. Walk our audience through the setup. I know what class we put on people and where you hook things up. Walk us through that and how it works and how these things are measured.
Sure. So the polygraph has several components. One of them is a seat sensor pad that someone is seated on in their chair, and that records and monitors very low body movements. There are pneumograph tubes. One goes up on your upper chest, the other on your lower abdomen, recording and monitoring body movements in those areas. There are 2 plates, metal plates called EDA plates, and they record and monitor sweat gland activity. They go on your right fingers, on your index and your ring finger. And then there's the blood pressure cuff that goes on typically the left bicep, and it records and monitors blood volume and pulse rate. And so that's basically your blood pressure. It doesn't give me that reading, but it shows me those changes in your blood volume and pulse rate. So those are the components. What they're recording and monitoring is physiology through your autonomic nervous system. So in other words, I explain it to folks such as this. When you are driving down the road, maybe not the 2 of you, but when you're driving down the road and there's law enforcement behind you and you see their lights go on and you automatically have changes that occur in your body, those are the changes that polygraph is recording and monitoring. Those physiological changes that you have no impact on, they're happening before you even realize they're happening. That's what polygraph is recording and monitoring.
And there used to be a paper chart. Is it still paper or is it strictly computer screen now?
It is computer. We can print. I do have a printer, but I don't print anymore. Back at NSA, we printed all of our charts and we would take them to our QC, who would then review them. But now it's all digital. So yeah, I could print, but I don't.
I'm kind of afraid to ask this question. Is there any component of AI working its way into the polygraph world, perhaps from either perspective, helping to better assess or analyze? I'm not even sure how a human could use it to somehow, quote unquote, trick a machine.
Right. I would say people are certainly doing more and more research about it before they would come in for a polygraph. They're going to turn to AI, they're going to turn to Google, and they're going to try and determine how can I do my best, or as you say, how can I beat this test? And that's always a question I address with people when they come in, and I make sure to tell them, whatever you've done as far as research, you leave it at the door and you work with me. There's good information, but there's also bad information. And I don't want you to come in here with the wrong impression and not listen to me and then fail your test. So as far as interpreting results, I would say that the computer, there's an algorithm, there's a computer system software that we can use to score the charts. Although the old timers still say, hey, you really need to hand score them. We don't want to count on the machine. So that's there. But as far as AI, in addition to what I've said, I don't see that happening.
Okay.
Let me ask you a question here. I have a couple questions. Biggest red flag in an interview?
They're words that they choose. I would say when people say that's about all it, or that's about all, or I think that's all that there was, or I can't quite remember, things that get very vague is a big tell, especially when they have maybe gone in a conversation with me just before that, when you're building rapport and they're very detailed about things. And then all of a sudden they get very vague and they don't want to be 100% confident about what they're telling you. It's the word choices that I'm very careful to listen to. And I would say, again, it betrays them. They can't help it. And so it makes it easy to see when there's something you need to pinpoint in on and perhaps come back around to it, but not let it go. You need to focus in on that time period that they're talking about.
One word to describe criminals that you've encountered.
I would say smug.
Smug.
Yeah. Almost arrogant, almost, that they're above it, that not only how could I accuse them, but if they did, boy, they'd have done it so much better and nobody would have caught them. Or how could they wouldn't be caught, if they were a criminal. So they deny it, or they say, hey, I'd be better and you wouldn't catch me anyway. So yeah, that's what I would say, smug.
I look at you, I see you as a woman, which means that you have great intuition. And then I see you as a polygrapher, which adds more to that. So here's my question. Your gut instinct versus evidence, who would win?
Mm. Mm. Have you ever read The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker, is what I would
Yes.
say.
Yes.
An amazing book.
Mhm.
I would have to say that evidence would win, simply because we have to keep ourselves honest. We can't, our gut tells a story and absolutely plays a role in that, but evidence is where it lies. We have to be true to that, because you could have an investigator who's been on the job for 40 years and it's his gut feeling, his or hers, that Joe Schmo did it. Well, then 15 years after they've been on death row, DNA comes out and absolves them. So that's why I say evidence has to be at the forefront. It really has to be what we count on. But you got to listen to that thing ticking in your brain saying, oh, this just doesn't seem right. You have to listen to that as well.
Most overrated investigative tool.
Most overrated investigative
Don't
tool.
say profiling.
No, I would never say that. No. I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. I actually don't know. I think collectively all of it is excellent. I think that to pick one thing out or another and use it alone on its own would not be productive. I think it's a set of tools, and all of it collectively together works well. I don't know that there's anything that's overrated that I can think of. What would you say to that? Do you have something in mind?
I would say gut instinct.
Really?
Yeah, is overrated. Because I'm an evidence guy just like you.
Mm-hmm.
I follow the evidence. You have a gut, and my gut has been wrong before.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people say I have a gut. I have this gut feeling. I just say that's overrated. What do the facts tell you? What does the evidence tell you? With that.
Right.
Well, let me add this in here. I would say gut instincts can help save your life.
Correct.
Following the evidence can help put the guy in prison who tried to kill you.
Yes.
Try to take your life.
Very good.
That's how you have. That's how I would wind that up. Now, some good questions in there. And the one tool.
More, if you let me get one more in here, my last.
Let me respond to one of your earlier questions.
Go ahead.
I think I forget exactly how you worded it, but the most overrated investigative tool I've learned over the years, especially studying linguistics, if you remember this at all, the voice stress
analyzer
or analysis, VSA, something like that. There were all kinds of people saying you can be a human polygraph machine, just recording people talking and look at the certain intonations, and you can either interview them or take statements they made from a dais somewhere, and that's just been so debunked everywhere. But I understand it's still being taught. Some police departments are still using it. FBI never did. So if there's one sort of tool out there that was abused, and I think was a bill of goods was sold, that to me that would be one of them. Ray, continue with your questions.
My last question to you, Jen, and then I'm going to let Jim run away with the show here. If you weren't doing what you're doing, what job would not trust you with their secrets?
Oh gosh, what job would not trust me?
Ray's in rare form tonight.
I don't know. Maybe Hollywood, because I'm a sucker for the gossip. So, if I was someone's assistant, someone big in Hollywood, they might have trouble keeping my mouth shut. But that would be what I would say.
Nice.
We got to throw that question back at you, Ray.
What job would not trust me with their secrets?
Yeah.
I co-host a Cold Red. I tell everything about Jim all the time.
That's why we got to hook a polygraph up to him, because that lie piece of paper will keep flying out, just like the old
Absolutely.
Xerox machine. All right, last question, at least from me, sort of a demographic question. I'm very interested in your present business, and I know it's successful, and I know we've talked, of course, other than right now, and you have clients that are very satisfied with the work you do. Can you possibly break it down to, is it more women contacting you than men, or more men than women? Is it older rather than younger? Can you give us even just a basic breakdown of at least the clients that come to you originally that want to hire you for your services?
Sure. I would say it's probably half and half,
Oh,
actually. There are as many women that contact me about infidelity as there are men.
okay.
Interestingly, it's typically the woman who will initiate the contact, but it's the man who will be tested. If that makes any sense, they will initiate the contact, but then say, well, it's my husband that I want tested. Normally it's the woman that initiates it, but it could be either one. It's really 50%.
An age bracket, I mean, up and down the 18 to
I would
older?
say it's probably people in their 30s to their 50s
Okay.
would be the age group. Yeah, it's really variable. It's a kind of a large swath. Unfortunately, infidelity happens in marriages whether you're 30 or 55. So yeah, it runs the gamut.
Interesting. And
Jim, we do have some questions from the audience.
yeah,
If you
that's
want,
right.
if
Oh,
you want to go
great.
to that, if you want to
Sure.
go to that, you want to
Sure.
read them? You want me to read them, Jim?
If you got one ready to go ahead. I'll get the next one.
This is from Eduardo, and he says we sometimes see characters in movies beat a polygraph by putting a tack in their shoe or taking a sedative. Do these types of techniques actually work in a modern polygraph exam?
They do not. Polygraph examiners are trained in what's called countermeasures. And so we are very schooled in how to look at the physiology and the changes that are occurring. And typically, someone who attempts that type of behavior, it's very obvious. They think that they're helping themselves, but they're actually shooting themselves in the foot, so to speak. Because it's very, very easily detectable. We see it right away. It's not something that is successful ever.
Especially if they get up and start tap dancing with the tack on their shoe, right?
Yes, right, right.
Question 2 from Casey. When working on cold cases, how do you manage the expectations of families who have been waiting for decades? Is there a fear that the truth might not be what they want to hear?
Yes, actually, and there's a case that comes to mind. There's a man in Ohio who it's a suburb just outside of Cincinnati, who it was deemed a suicide, and the family believes it was murder. And so they sent the paperwork to Cold Case Foundation to be looked at. And I got the case and I looked at it and had lots of contact with the deceased uncle. And I finally had to say to him, I'm really sorry, but not only has the law enforcement agency closed out the case, but it was closed as a suicide. And until and when I have different information, you know how this works. You have to have new information. You have to have something that comes to the fore that is really indicating homicide. The case just simply will not be reopened. And it's very difficult to tell families that. I mean, this uncle said that he almost lost his marriage over this case with his nephew. And so he would call. He called on the holidays, and he would call. I was moving my kid into college, and I would just pick up the phone and say, hey, so and so, how you doing? And there was a lot of contact, and so it was upsetting to tell him that, but that was the reality.
And you got to be honest with the people. They don't want you blowing smoke in any direction in that regard. So yeah, good response there.
Yeah, the
Right.
last question is from Jasmine. And she said, for students who want to get into forensic psychology or polygraphy, what is a necessary skill that isn't taught in a textbook?
Mm. I would say actually something that Joe Navarro said, and that is we're in the business of people. And that's very true. I would say, get into jobs or positions that allow you to be forward facing, that allow you to be client facing, that allow you to get experience with talking to people, with being socialized with people, with having to talk to people from all kinds of walks of life, because that's something that you just need to be good at. And it isn't something that's taught in a textbook.
Couple quick things here. How can listeners support the Cold Case Foundation?
They can go to coldcasefoundation.org. I'm sorry. And there are classes there. They do some training for law enforcement, but also you can donate there because they are a nonprofit. So coldcasefoundation.org.
And our last question is, what is your advice, Jennifer, for anyone currently looking into a personal or local cold case?
There is a great book by Joe Giacalone. I'm not sure if the two of you are familiar with him. He's a sergeant retired out of New York City, NYPD, and he wrote a book on it's like a handbook on cold cases and how to attack them. And so I would say look into that. And also just be in touch with law enforcement agencies in your local area. Sometimes they are agreeable to have those, sort of people that don't have not proper training, but people that don't have law enforcement training, but who are willing to help in some way to help move cases along or take a look at them for the investigator. Some agencies are open to that, and so it's worth calling. It's worth offering your assistance.
Okay, that is definitely good to know. Ray, final words, and I'll
just
take us out.
If you could just let our audience know again, what's the best way to get a hold of you through your company, or you have a personal something you want to share with our audience, be able to get a hold of you to use your services?
Sure. mendaxforensics.com. And then Jennifer at mendaxforensics.com is how you can get me directly. And if Jim, if you want to put up a phone number or the website or however you might do that in writing so people can see, that would be fine as well.
We'll do that.
Yep.
And just to be clear, it's spelled Mendax, Mendax. Is there a meaning behind that word?
Yes, Mendax means liar in Latin.
Very good.
Vidi Vici Vici. I should have known that. Yes. That was great, Jennifer. This conversation has been great. I'm glad we met however many years ago it was, and I'm glad we renewed our friendship. And I'll gladly give you a ride to 30th Street Station anytime after VDOC. I know it helps you out a little bit. And yeah, folks, I guess unfortunately your service, it is more or less localized, we'll say, to the Delmarva area. If you're not familiar, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, that's sort of the acronym they use. But I'm sure you'd be, if someone emails you with questions, you could probably help them out with something in terms of what they're looking for, maybe get someone else's services in there. But Jennifer Thompson, thanks again for coming on board Cold Red tonight. It was very educational, and you've imparted lots of knowledge and experience to our audience. So folks, on that note, please subscribe to the Cold Red podcast and follow us on all Cold Red podcast social media platforms. Check out our blog at coldredpodcast.com. We'll be back next week, another episode of Cold Red. Until then, stay safe, be aware of your surroundings. It just might save your life. Thanks to our producers, Matt McLaughlin, Matt Robinson, Rick Schilling, our music coordinator, and everyone, including Ray and Jennifer. We will see you next time on Cold Red.
Thank you.